We are so we're gonna wait for this to populate, but we got a pretty cool show tonight. We're getting away from dog training today. We're gonna gravitate towards what happens when you do bad things in the training.
Not even bad things, just things. Life happens. It's how you handle what goes down. I mean, you got so many times the unexpected happens, and it's important to keep a cool head and work your way through it. But I mean, you can be doing all the right things and still have things come up that just are so out of the box or so mind blowing or so humbling at the same time. It's really, really tough to be on top of things all the time.
Emergencies happen spontaneously when you least expect it, right?
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. Today we were today one of my guys stopped by. I was at lunch. He's like, man, we got a problem. He said, we've got 4 different dogs in heat at the kennel right now, and you know, keeping an eye on everything, keeping it right. He opened the door to his trailer to get a dog out to run, and there's no dog. And he's like, I know I got a dog in here. Opens the door next door, and the dog had jailbroke into the next kennel.
Oh.
And oh yeah, by the way, a dog who had not been in heat.
Oh,
you see where I'm headed?
Oh yeah.
So of course, then you've got the opportunity for what could have happened. What, oh my goodness, you know, how in the world did this happen? But so immediately I pulled progesterone. I did all the tests, and thank goodness she's not at the breeding stage. But that's a perfect example. I mean, you do everything in the world to make sure that when you close the door, that it doesn't come open until you want it to. You don't expect that when you open the door, the dog's not there. It has escaped one way or another.
Right.
I mean, things happen all the time. You do everything you can, and when the unexpected happens, it's how you handle that circumstance, you know, from there. That can be the difference between, you know, a hiccup and a big oops, or, you know, even life and death. So it's you know, they don't tell you about those days when you think about being a dog trainer. They don't tell you about the hard days where you don't feel like anything can go right and you're doing everything you can, but yet, you know, life still happens and knocks you down. So it was one of those days for me. It's kind of ironic that we're going to be talking to Dr. Jonathan tonight. I'm excited to hear his expertise on a lot of different things. So,
well, while everybody's sort of populating here, we got 15 people: Leonard, Butch, Jeff Matthews, Lois McCracken, Grace Williams, Quint Broom, Caroline Davis, Diane, Leo. What's up, Leo?
Leo and I spent 2 hours last night on a different group meeting for Super Retriever Series work. We're seeing more of each other than we even want to admit.
Well, so tonight I've been gone for a week. I was up at Lake St. Clair in Michigan filming a Bassmaster Elite event up there, and then I did some work for Mark Zona, and I just got back. Hey, Tanner, go lay down, buddy. You're putting pressure on me. I know, separation anxiety. I know. Go lay down. Thank you.
He said, man, I'm a star of the show, and you don't even let me ever get on.
Yeah, dude, a pair of my headphones while I was gone. Speaking of emergencies, he gets really bad separation anxiety, and when I'm gone, within 24 hours, he chews something up important for sure. But
because he knows what's important.
That's right. You got to get me back. But so tonight, instead of talking about a dog training seminar, we're going to go down the veterinarian road, and we've got about 20 minutes that we have to fill in before our vet, Dr. Jonathan Bradshaw, comes on live with us. Go lay down. Go lay down. Lay down. Lay down. He's tight to me right now. Dr. Jonathan Bradshaw, who is a veterinarian. He has 2 clinics. He has one in Arkadelphia and he has one in Little Rock. And that sounds like he lives with me. He's a small animal practitioner, but he's a duck hunter and he's got labs. In fact, he just bought one of Jim Ronquist's, Tyler Patterson and Sean Stahl's puppies out of that litter. And he specializes in sporting dogs. He sponsors and helps with the Super Retriever series. He's the official veterinarian for the SRS now, and he's not going to be at every event, obviously, but he will definitely be at the local event, including the Crown in October in Huntsville, and he'll be at all the events, obviously at Pepper's Pond and anything close to that. So we're going to bring him on tonight. We're going to talk about common field issues, common home, remedies, emergency tactics, all kinds of stuff that, we all want to know. So I would highly recommend that you guys think of questions and type those questions in as we're going so we can carry this conversation a bit longer, because you guys are the ones that have had experiences or have friends that have had experiences. And, now's the time to ask these questions while we have Dr. Bradshaw on our show. And I'm sure he's going to be able to answer lots of different questions.
And every time you think, you've seen it all, or there's nothing new left to experience. It's amazing the different ways that dogs can find to get into predicaments or come up with some kind of new ailment, or, find a creative way or a creative spot to get hurt. I mean, it's a never ending cycle around here. And part of it is, we deal with so many animals there, it's just like a daycare in a sense, that the more you have, the greater chance that you're going to have something come up. It's not necessarily that more dogs makes it more dangerous, as much as it's just the fact that you have more dogs, you have more sets of feet walking around that could find places to go that they don't need to go. So you just, like I said, you dot all your I's, you cross all your T's, and you really stay on top of things and make sure, one of my guys, we pick on him, but I make sure not to pick on him too much because it's such a desirable thing. One of my guys, he stays every night. He's OCD, and he's got to be the last one to touch every kennel. And he will go through and check all the doors on all the trailers, even though that nobody's there. I mean, he knows that there's no dogs on there, and he counts the same dogs 2, 3, 4 times, and he'll go through every kennel and literally put hands on all, because that's just what makes him sleep better. And some other guys want to pick on him, and at the end of the day, I'm like, this is the perfect guy to have.
What a great guy to have in your camp. I mean, yeah, I wish all my bartenders at my bar were like that.
And I talk about it all the time with dogs, that the same thing that makes them good is the same thing that makes them bad. And this guy, Russell, is not the fastest trainer I have as far as daily work, but he's so meticulous in what he does. It's the same thing that frustrates folks. Hey, we're spending an extra 20-30 minutes at the kennel waiting on him to get in, is the same thing that he's spending an extra 20-30 minutes after everybody's gone looking after everything anyway. So it is the essence of him. The same thing that might frustrate folks on one side is the same thing that makes him so good, not just at checking on the kennel, but just training dogs and doing what he does so well. Tim, I hadn't forgot about your email, by the way. Don't think I have. It's just been insanity around here this week. I've got 27 dogs on the trailer. I've got a master test that starts here Friday. We got a Friday, Saturday, Sunday master test with 152 dogs entered. It is, I got done. I walked out the house about 5 minutes before 6 yesterday, and I finished my last task last night at 10 o'clock, and it looks like we're going to do very, very, very same thing tonight as well. So it's just the time of year it is. You got to hustle this is when we've got to get ready for all the big things that are coming down the pipe.
So how many dogs in your camp or in your kennel go back to their owners for hunting season, would you say, on average?
Just about every one of them. In one regard or another. Absolutely. And even if they're not going home to hunt, they're going home to rest. Some of my owners are a lot more avid hunting than others, but like, when hunting season comes in, where a lot of trainers kind of shut down and some guys guide, some guys take a break, we bring in a whole nother group. We've got a whole nother shift of dogs coming in, because since it's not just me and a couple of bird boys, since I've got multiple trainers on staff, I can't afford for them to not get paid or not to be sitting on reduced numbers. So we've got to keep the numbers up so everybody can afford to feed their families.
So I heard a friend of mine who's a fellow photographer in the outdoor industry, Chris Irwin, he contacted me about getting a dog. He's going to be working as a full-time guide this fall in Kansas, and he got in touch with you, and he ended up getting a dog. Is that correct?
They're in the process right now. I think if everything goes well, he's supposed to pick him up Thursday.
This Thursday, he's coming to your kennel to pick him up?
That's right.
He or a she?
He. His name is Angus, and Will McElveen, another one of my guys, has done all the work with him. He actually came. He was a field trial washout early on. We got him before he was 2, and Will's done everything. He's taken him all the way up through Master Hunter. He's a really nice. He's been hunted the last 3 years. That was the big thing that made Chris such a good match, is that Chris was talking about buying a started dog, and I said, man, with the workload that you've got going and taking clients and doing what you're doing, you don't need to be teaching a dog how to hunt. You need something that is a open, shut the door. I mean, just rock and roll dog. I said, and this is a perfect match because this dog has hunted for 3 years. He's 5 years old. He's got 3 years of solid hunting experience, not just here and there, but hunting 3-4 days a week. This sucker will carry you. And, we had all these conversations and said all this stuff out, and he still, after he saw the dog the first time, he's like, that's so much more dog than I ever thought, I would be looking at to buy. And that's kind of, in any business, in any industry, if you can overcompensate, or over feel what expectations are, it usually breeds success in the long run. So I'm super excited for both of them.
Pablo Lupus, can you please type your question up in the comments here? Because we're going to ask Stephen live. This would be a really good time to do it because we have 10 minutes before Dr. Bradshaw comes live with us. He's actually at an event right now, and I think he's doing he's examining dogs for at a dog event or at a kennel facility or something right now. So he's busy from 7 to 7:30. He's going to come on right at 7:30. So if you have your question, I forgot that I actually sent it. Let me look in my messages here. Pablo had a big question for you. Let me type him up. And Cristiano Batella is from. Do you know him? He's chiming in from Brazil. Dude, we're international, bro.
That's no doubt. I do know Elliot. I will see Elliot this weekend. He's one of my fellow folks from South Carolina. He'll be down to run his up and coming master dog this weekend. We're super excited. I mean, I don't have to tell any of y'all how stir crazy COVID has made so many of us, and we're blessed that we get to do what we do outdoors and that we don't have as many restrictions on doing what we're doing as opposed to folks that are doing events in tighter quarters. So it's
yes. Small. I mean, I'm feeling it on both sides. I've got plenty of work to do in my media company, which is a blessing, but my bar is suffering, tremendously. We're losing money on a monthly basis to the point to where we're struggling. Pablo, yeah, so Pablo. I pulled his question up. He's from Peru, and he wants to start an HRC club in Peru. And he's been tuning in to our show on a regular basis. And I'm going to read his question in full. I haven't reread it. Go lay down, buddy. Lay down. But I'll read it in full. Hey, Jake. Hope you're well. I was wondering if you could ask Stephen on the next slide feed a question about my dog struggles when running a blind while hunting. This is the scenario. I've trained my dog since he was a little puppy, and I do some collar conditioning, but I took the non-force route and never did force to pile, but just the attrition route, and starts with running sight blinds, then pattern blinds, and finishing with cold blinds, and he does awesome in training. We can run up to 200, 250-yard blinds on grassy fields when training. The thing is now that I'm hunting on cornfields, usually cut cornfields, he's just reluctant to go out by himself more than 50 yards. Then he pops and looks back at me. So my question would be that maybe he's just lacking confidence on the new environment this week, haven't trained on cut cornfields before, and he needs to cross this mental barriers, or just doesn't want to go, and it's conditioning problem. What should I do? Should I go back and do force fetch, or should I just train for that scenario and build his confidence up?
Well, it's funny, when you watch folks in a situation like this who have already been self-analytical, and obviously Pablo has. I applaud you for taking your steps, training your dog, and I'm so stoked that you're doing an HRC club down there. That's really neat. I mean, we've got several clubs in Canada, but that's really, really, really cool. I'd love to go down there and run one day.
Way cool.
So, Pablo, go back and read your own post. I mean, you answered your own question multiple times there. One, when you start talking about running sight blinds, you've got a dog that has not got the compulsion training that most of my dogs are conditioned for. So you're relying on a little bit of goodwill there. You don't have the in route back neck back or force to pile concept. So you have to make the decision: am I going to row this boat and continue to go with the no force aspect, or am I going to go back and do the rework? I'm obviously a compulsion guy. I think your dog is lacking a sense of urgency about his work, rather than, obviously there's probably a lack of confidence, but when you don't have the compulsion aspect, he has confidence neither in the circumstances that he's in, nor in you as a leader. So when you say back, he doesn't understand that. Even in a foreign situation, if he understands that back means go, he can at least have confidence in the concept that back means go and that dad's going to get me through it. You don't have that with him because you don't have the compulsion aspect. You know that. I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. But when you say that he runs really, really good blinds on grassy fields, but you're working in cut corn, you haven't generalized your commands from the cut grass fields to the corn fields. So you got to train in what you're going to hunt in. So I think that will do you, if you don't go back and do your compulsion work, I think that will be your next really big hurdle, is if you get to the cut cornfields, do some sight blinds, build up his confidence and make it fun. The more comfortable he gets in that other atmosphere, the more he will be able to generalize and associate the commands that you've established to the hunting scenario. But no matter what steps you take, I don't know how old your dog is, so there could be a diminishing return if you go back and do your compulsion work. Again, I don't know, but I got a feeling on your next dog, you probably won't go with the low pressure route.
I hope that answers your question. If you have any more details in your question and you need answered, Pablo, please ask. And I'm curious to know is if you cast and your verbal cast in Spanish or in English. That's really cool what you're doing. Like he's 3 years old. That might be the coolest. Like, I want to come down and film an HRC event in Peru.
How cool would the tailgate dinner be, huh?
Oh my God. We'd be eating grilled.
Can I say hi?
You sure can. Come here, buddy. Walker wants to say hi.
What's up, Bubba?
Hi.
Put a shirt on, boy. That was, I mean, a 3-year-old dog, you're not too late. I mean, when we discuss this, and I like to give the analogy of the 70-year-old man watching a guitar player play, and the 70-year-old man watches the guy play his guitar, and he's enjoying the music, and the guitar player stops, and the 70-year-old says, man, I've always wanted to play guitar, but I never picked it up. I wish I'd have done it 50 years ago. And the guitar player says, in 5 years, you can be a 75-year-old man who's played guitar for 5 years, or you can be a 75-year-old man that's never picked up a guitar. So the other thing I preach in basics is that a step backwards in dog training is always a step forward. If you're stepping back to fill in holes in your foundation training, that is building a better foundation to move forward. So I'm a big advocate of going back. I'm a big believer in force fetch, and I think it would help you a pile, Pablo. But the answer is whatever you choose to do, be wholehearted in it. Don't be halfway. You know what the Bible says about being lukewarm. If you neither hot nor cold, he's going to spew you out of his mouth. Sell into what you're going to do. If you're going to do no pressure, give it all you got with no pressure. If you're going to go back and force fetch, don't halfway do it. Go back and really fill in your foundation, get in there and get it right. And you will have your rewards either way because you have dedicated yourself to it wholeheartedly. That's one of the coolest things about labs is that you can even do the wrong thing enough that the dogs will figure out what you're looking for and usually give it to you, even if you're doing the approach the wrong way.
Oh, I did that for 11 years with my last dog. That's a fact. Hey, Dr. Bradshaw's coming in. So your vertical, can you hear me, Doc? So your screen is vertical. Some reason we need to go horizontal here. That's better. Yeah, that's better. Can you handle that? I'll go back to force fetch for sure. Listening to you guys, and Pablo, I got to tell you, dude, your dog being bilingual is extremely badass. I mean, that is cool as that. Your dog can take Spanish and English casts.
He probably can cuss in both languages too.
Dude, you should come up here. You should bring your dog to the States. You can come stay at my house. I'll give you an open invitation. Bring the dog here. Let's train. And then, if go do an SRS club event or some kind of HRC event or something, and I would and speak to your dog in Spanish, you will be a freaking rock star.
And I don't know how far along you are as far as getting that club established, but if you need any help, if I can get you in contact, or if you're having any troubles, we're actually in the process of going through that as well down here. So if you need some help on anything, I'm not always the paperwork guy, but I got a really good source, and her name is Kendra, and she's great on stuff like that. So if you got any issues, I'll be glad to pass you on to her.
Hey, let me tell you, Stephen married into administration values, and Kendra kills it. I mean, she crushes it every time we need her to come through. She does. So, Dr. Jonathan Bradshaw, as I told you guys earlier, I think we only had about half the people on that had populated at that point. But tonight, instead of doing dog training seminar, we're going to do a veterinary seminar with Dr. Jonathan Bradshaw. Again, he's got two practices in Arkansas, one in Arkadelphia, one in Little Rock. He's an avid duck hunter. He loves labs. He's got a couple labs himself, and like I said, he just bought one of Jim Ronquest, Tyler Patterson puppies, and he specializes in sporting dogs. That's his true passion and his true love. So we asked him, since we were talking about it a couple weeks ago, talking about some emergency, treatments and field issues, training issues and whatnot, the heat, hot water, hot weather, ACLs, whatever. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to bring Dr. Bradshaw in right now in 3, 2, 1, bingo. Dr. Bradshaw, how are you doing?
Doing great, guys. How are y'all?
Doing well. Stephen, meet Dr. Bradshaw. Dr. Bradshaw, meet Stephen.
Dr. B, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Great.
So you what were you just doing? Why were you late?
Yeah. I took on more than I could handle this evening. I was taking some OFA films for a kennel here in Arkadelphia. We were doing some stuff. So I kind of, we've been having some busy days. Like this whole scenario has just made it really busy for us, which is awesome. But doesn't, today it didn't leave me much time to do some fun stuff. So I waited till after work to do that. And then, but yeah, I wrapped it all up and found my way on here.
We appreciate you coming on. I know, I'm hoping, people, there's several people on here that are going to have questions, professional trainers, amateurs. We have people from Brazil. We have people from Peru on here right now. So this is an international event.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm super glad to be on here. I appreciate y'all bringing me on. Thank you so much.
What kind of brought this whole thing up, Dr. Bradshaw, is, we were discussing, training in the heat and other things, and just how much, it honestly, it amazes me how little these dogs get injured, considering the circumstances that we put them in, considering the factors that they deal with on a daily basis. Quite honestly, the most injuries I get with my animals, it seems like it always happens. The most dangerous time for them is when they go home. And I don't even mean to go home to hunt. I mean, it's just crazy stuff that happens when they go home. Goofy stuff. But what do you see the most of that, not necessarily as preventable, but that could be dealt with better before they get to you? I mean, the first thing that runs into my mind is heat. Yep. Heat stroke, but you're the guy that does the medical side on a daily basis. What do you see the most of? What could be prevented and what could be handled better before they get to you?
It's always it always feels like it's a weight management game with these dogs. Like all the injuries that they get happen like after they start to put on pounds, because they're not running near as hard as they were with you, So that's, I'm like, I'll see a a duck dog come in and I'm like, whoa, like you are who, and you are titled what? But yeah, sometimes I think the weight factor plays a huge role in it, but I don't see a lot of injuries either. I'll be honest with you, that's not, and if anything, you see cruciate tears, but those seem pretty, pretty minimal anyway, at this young dog age of I mean, I just don't see a whole heck of a lot, but heat strokes definitely, but a lot of labs are so pretty conditioned to it as well, so they're a lot more so than some of the other breeds. So yeah, I'd say big thing are injuries, just cuts and scrapes and big cuts and big punctures. That's a lot what I see in the wintertime during duck season. And yeah, just people going places they go or think places they need to watch out for. I see that a ton, but yeah, I think it's a little bit for me. It's a little bit like trying to think a little bit further on down the line, like how to prevent things on down there when we hit that 5-6 year mark when you've got so much, I don't know, emotionally invested as well as like financially invested, just your buddy, and these arthritic issues start to creep up quicker and quicker, so trying to stave those off from the get-go is always my direction. So, but yeah.
So you big on supplements there as far as staving it off, or I mean, is it the way that you take dogs in and out the truck? Is it the conditions that you put them in? What do you, when you're talking about staving it off? I mean, what are the steps that these folks can take to keep the longevity of the dog?
I think consistency, just like you said, you don't see many injuries in your kennel, just because you're so consistent with everything that you do. Every day we do this, we come back on, we eat at this time, we eat in this manner. Like, I think consistency is so huge. And I think when they get back home, they lose that consistency, and, they want to go and do family dog kind of things too. So they're getting that, a little bit of that as well. And then they're always getting overfed from the kids a good bit too. So at times, I mean, I think consistency is huge. And, supplement wise, there's a whole lot of debate in there as to which supplements you need to use and when to start them. I don't tend to start them until we start to have some issues, but I notice little small nuances in certain dogs, and I'll take X-rays before. I like to take kind of X-rays, kind of survey X-rays, just trying to see what's going on arthritis-wise in our elbows and our hips, just early on. And early on being before you see any injury, and so I'll look there and see if I see anything. Kind of watch how they go, see how limber they are when they hop out, and things like that. That's usually when I start supplements, as far as glucosamine goes, anyway.
One thing that I think is hilarious, and we deal with this as professional dog trainers on a large scale, but you even see it with owners who want to shortchange dogs on the food that they feed, whether it be because you're feeding a high quality food and they don't take much, and they would rather, just like people, we think that dogs eating a lot more makes them happier.
Yeah.
When you're feeding high quality food, you don't need a high volume of food. So some people, I think, change foods because they want to feed them more often or more of what they're feeding. Other people, I mean, it can get so much on that bag of dog food is $60, and I'm going, that's a $60 bag of dog food, but how much money do you have wrapped up in training and investment in your animal? And some people go crazy to the other extreme. They go, to the really, really high dollar dog foods that I don't think necessarily meet the needs of a working dog either.
Sure.
But I think, does diet from an early age have a tendency to help as far as your long-term injuries, not just in how much you feed, but on the quality of food that you feed as well?
Yeah, I definitely think it does. I think it plays a big role. I think it comes in, nutrient wise as they're growing, bones developing. Like, I think that's a big thing too, as long as you're staying consistent moving from puppy food to adult food. When you do that, when you make those changes, like, I think you need to be pretty precise in when you make that change. And I don't know if it's an age, and we have to kind of attach an age to it, but I think it's dog specific too. Every dog grows faster. And so I like to make that switch appropriately when their bones have developed appropriately, because as you got to think, if they're getting shortchanged on nutrients, and cartilage is not forming quite like it needs to, that's going to have an effect down the road too. So staying consistent and sticking with some of these dog food brands like Purina that are really focused on looking at nutrients from a sporting dog scenario. I think that's huge. But yeah, everybody gets, for some reason, I don't know why they get off on these other foods. I don't know why they want to jump off the train when
it's working. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Not at all. I don't know why.
You must get caught up in the marketing of some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I remember years ago I read a study, and I can't tell you where I read it, but it was and it was probably in a Purina pamphlet, but it actually said that it was a proven fact that dogs that started on Purina and stayed on it their whole life actually lived longer. Again, it's the consistency, in my opinion, that they actually lived longer, more full, healthy lives. And I was like, man, that's enough for me to hear. And I will never forget when I first started, you know, even I money was a very, very big thing as far as the lack thereof that we were dealing with. And so, you know, I'd have the client dogs on Purina Pro Plan, and then I'd have like my personal dogs on Purina High Pro, you know, the old blue bag. They even did away with that now. But there was another really quality food that I liked that was called Diamond, and it was manufactured not far down the road. And this was probably 15 years ago, maybe somewhere around there. But long story short, Diamond had an alpha toxin issue, and a lot of dogs died from that issue. Now, after that, that was probably the safest dog food company in the country for a long time because of all the regiments that they had to go through. But I looked at Kendra right then and I said, I will go broke feeding the highest quality feed that I can feed. That's going to the thought of flipping on a light switch in the morning and finding a bunch of dead dogs is just not acceptable. And I said, that's not something that I'm going to sleep well on. So I will be more than glad to feed whatever it takes, pay whatever it takes to make sure I've got a high quality food that I'm not going to have to deal with. And that's the thing about Purina is when you get them, when you buy it, it's the same all the time. And it's the consistency that you can always expect. That's what I love about that food. Mr. Tim asked, would taking a dog through warm up before extensive training have positive impact on joint and ligament injuries? I can answer that one for you. Yeah. Warming up's always a good thing.
Just like a track and field athlete or a football player or whatever, or a baseball player, a pitcher. I mean, warming up can't hurt before you go out and play a game.
Not at all. They're just going from a dead stop to full sprint. Dead stop, full sprint. I mean, yeah.
Go do it yourself.
That's a great question that Mr. Jeff said, what's your opinion on removing Dewclaws in relation to tendon growth injuries, CCL injuries in the future?
Yeah, you know, and I've run into this, right? Because I was the one who removed the Dewclaws from Jimbo's puppies, you know, and so and one of them was gonna be mine essentially. So I've been, you know, and I thought about it, but it's just become such a thing that you have to do, and I think people feel like if they don't do it, they're not providing the veterinary care, and they need more. But it's so hard to study that because all the dogs are so different. But I think they provide a purpose, and I think we need to keep them. To be honest with you, I really do.
Keep the Dewclaws on.
I think, you know, the big reason towards the reason that we gravitated toward taking them off is avoiding injuries to that specific. You know, one, that thing gets razor sharp and it will cut the fire out of you. But two, it's the thought that if you've ever seen a dog that has that Dewclaw ripped in the field, it's not usually a pretty sight. You know, and the reason that you take them off before 3 to 5 days is the Dewclaw hasn't actually attached to the leg yet. It's a whole lot easier to do. I think, Jeff, you're probably going to see a lot of mixed reviews on if that actually inhibits tendon growth. I would be skeptical of that. However, I am a huge advocate of not having dogs fixed before they're mature, because I think when you spay and neuter a performance dog too early, that does affect tendon development, ligament development, and that because those sexual hormones also affect physical development. And most vets are going to say you got to spay or neuter your dog at 6 months old. Yet I don't see the vet saying I'll do it for free just for the goodness of your dog. I mean, I just, you obviously want to prevent pregnancy, but I do think allowing a dog to get physically mature before you do that helps prevent ligament damage and tendon damage in the future. Have you seen that, Dr. Bradshaw?
Yeah, the vet field's opened up to that idea now, like as a whole. Like it's really opening up. There's lots of studies coming out showing a lessened chance of tearing a cruciate ligament if you've waited. Lessen issues with arthritis down there. I mean, we're starting to see that across the veterinary field. So that 6 month cutoff that we're somewhat taught in school is getting lengthened a good ways. I definitely recommend going out, a couple of heat cycles until they're fully mature. That's thoughts on that. Even if, if you're, I'd definitely be cautious about spaying them before they're a year old for sure.
And I think you do call. I'm a big natural guy. I've always toted take the Dewclaws off mantle. I'm not necessarily. It's not. I can give or take, to be quite honest with you. That doesn't affect me.
Like, I think it's interesting. Like, it's an interesting thought theory to look at. I don't think it's going to affect their performance a ton, but do I think it's 100% necessary? I don't think so, but I think it's just become the norm about like.
But where I do get on my bandwagon is that I think we don't let dogs be dogs enough, especially in the rearing process and the birthing process. All these things where these natural instincts are imprinted on dogs. I feel like we're way too synthetic. We're way too sanitary. I mean, if you'd have seen my children today, you'd understand that dirt's a part of life. Like my wife says, God made dirt and dirt don't hurt. I think that is one of the things I really strive for in the few litters that we raise, is to let them have an opportunity to develop those natural instincts, to learn that using the bathroom outside, out on the grass, or not on concrete, giving them that option as early as possible, I think really helps the dogs develop good instincts.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
We got some questions rolling in. I'm gonna read some of them. We'll take them one at a time. So Pablo Lupus, yeah, for a dog to drink a lot of water when he goes out to the tree. My last dog usually gets sick after a hunt because the amount of water he takes in going on retrieves. That's probably a question that both of you guys can answer, because you can answer the medical side of it, Dr. Bradshaw, and Stephen, you're going to answer that from a how he
for sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dr. Bradshaw.
So it kind of broke up the first part of the question. What was the first part of the question?
Dangerous for a dog that drinks a lot of water when he goes out for a retrieve. His last dog usually gets sick after a hunt because the amount of water that he takes in going on retrieves. He's probably swimming with an open mouth, low on the water. Whatever he's got in his mouth, he's just sucking water in. And then he throws up when he gets to the bank, I'm sure. That sounds like me in a triathlon.
Yeah, it's definitely an issue for sure. I would definitely not do that. I mean, we're always concerned about like any sort of stomach filling with anything when they're running and moving. And I mean, the potential for a stomach torsion's there. It's not high, but it's always there, and you want to keep them fully hydrated prior to just they're not, not too apt to drink. I don't know if it's drinking or if it's just gorging as they're going towards the retrieve. But yeah, I'd definitely be cautious of that. What do you say?
There's an abundance of things that you see dogs drink on the way out. One is the obvious that you hit on. They're dehydrated. They've been sitting in a box, not access to water, and it's that that they actually are dehydrated. However, you do see other illustrations, and this is where you've got to problem solve the behavior. Sometimes it's actually an avoidance behavior. You'll see dogs that are somewhat nervous about the work, or lack of sense of urgency. Sorry, Pablo, and we'll hit on that again. Lack of sense of urgency about what they're doing. They're just kind of chasing daisies, and it turns into a habitual response. I normally try to, if I see that start, especially with a dog that's not done it their whole life, I try to get them out of it one way or another, making sure they're hydrated to start with, in route force, making the task super achievable and understandable so that they can get through it without a lot of anxiety or stress. But I actually had a dog that was struggling on a water blind years ago that tried to let their stomach flip. They were taking on water like that. They had been running a really good blind. They got in trouble. They got apprehensive. They took in too much air. And normally what I'll do if I see a dog that bloats like that, when they come back, I'll make sure they burp. I'll throw them happy bumpers till they burp. I'll even push on their sides to make sure that they burp. And this little dog would not do it. And I actually had to crate her and make sure I gave her Gas X to reduce the gas in her stomach, because she's the only dog I ever saw that I actually worried about when they come out. When she came out of the water, and I'm like, she just would not expel the air. So called one of my ace #1 vet techs, and he said, "You got Gas X?" And I was like, "Are you serious?"
That's good.
But so you see that become from avoidance. The other thing I think some dogs have trouble with are they have a little bit of trouble, whether it be a laryngeal paralysis, something to do with the way that they're trying to suck through their mouth instead of through their nose while they're swimming, and they're actually pulling some water in, especially when they have an object in their mouth. That is the one that you really got to watch for. That some dogs bloat naturally, and a lot of them, if you get them in the water enough and let them, especially if they're high rollers, and let them teach them how to pace themselves, they will actually learn to compensate for that natural tendency to bloat. But you definitely want to try to head it off at the pass if you can when it comes to that, because a dog that's sucking in water while it's swimming is not going to be at the top of the ladder when it comes to water work. They're not going to be on their game because when they take in so much water, it's physically painful for them, and they've got to expel it at some point.
I used to be a boxer. I boxed for 12 years, and my trainers, whether it was in sparring matches or in fights, when they squirted water in my mouth, between rounds, they always had a bucket there for me to spit the water out. And they said, "Don't drink it." So I would hydrate, hours before a fight, and then during the fight, I never got to drink water. They would just splash my water out. So, I wouldn't have cotton mouth, and I would put my mouthpiece back in, but they never told me to drink water, because obviously you'd bloat, and then you get hit with one good shot in the gut and you're out. and there's questions coming in about stomach twist or stomach flip. And before we get to those questions, I want to save those, because I feel like that's probably one of the most anticipated questions and discussions in this group that we're going to have is stomach flip. And while it doesn't happen that often, it's the most devastating, the most untimely emergency effect that you get into. And I think we need to save that for a little bit later in the show, because it's so important. So we're going to save those questions, but there's a couple others.
Rolling back up, don't forget Miss Diane in Field Dog Life, talking about her vet criticizing her for not feeding her dogs enough.
Yeah.
I've told you once, and I'm going to continue to tell you, get another vet. Most of these people don't know anything past giving a vaccine or, spay and neuter your pet. They don't understand performance animals. Get far, far away from this veterinarian. Go find a good one like Dr. Bradshaw.
Send Dr. Bradshaw a DM on Instagram. He's on there a lot, and he's happy to answer questions. So absolutely contact him. He's in this world. He specializes in high performance dogs, and that's where his passion is. So he's going to be able to answer these questions accurately for you, Diane. So by all means, use him as a resource. That's what he's here for, right?
Right. That's exactly right.
How important is it to switch to a senior dog food with performance dogs, let's say from Pro Plan Sport 30/20 to a Pro Plan Senior, which is less fat and protein content?
What's your thought on that, Stephen?
You're going to hear me say something that's unpopular, okay? And that is that on that bag of Purina Pro Plan Sport, it says right under the label, an all life stages food. That I have zero issue starting puppies on Pro Plan 30/20 and keeping them on there until they, if a dog retires and is not running anymore, they don't need that much. They don't need that hot of food. It can burn up their kidneys. But you can feed them less as they get older. One of the big reasons to switch to that senior is to reduce the load on their kidneys, as well as just keep them from putting on extra fat.
Yeah.
But I'm a 30/20 guy until I have a problem or a need to get away from it.
Yeah, I think it definitely fits the needs of all dogs. Once they hit that, once they get further on in life and they're starting to have joint issues, or they're starting to move a little slower, then we need to make sure that we keep the weight off of them. Their metabolism tends to slow down at those older ages of 7, 8 when they hit that senior time span. So I tend to adjust their 30/20 a little bit. And then if that's not, then you're going to have to find something with some more fill in it. So that's where that senior food would come in at that point, when you're just trying to make sure they're feeling full, but, giving them a full meal, but still limiting their calorie intake. And so ultimately just keeping their weight right. That's what our whole goal in nutrition. They've spent so much time formulating that diet. You don't need to mess with it, but you do need to be mindful of how much you're feeding, because that'll change.
It would astound folks. I mean, some of the biggest dogs in my kennel eat the least. It's just what their caloric demands are. And you'll have dogs with, that you can't keep weight on, that they eat the most, and it's part of their growing cycle, or what the stage that they are in their life, or what they're doing in the field. But I mean, when you're talking about maintaining a dog that's not working every day, I mean, it does not take a lot to maintain weight and keep a dog that's healthy and in good shape. And guys, we're not trying to shove Pro Plan down your throat. There's other really great foods out there. I'm just telling you what I have used from the jump, because it's what I know. I'm big time. I am not a big fan of change when it comes to the standards that I use. Like for instance, when Garmin bought Tritronics, I was distraught before they ever changed a thing, because when you have something that is the standard, that was your logo, you're the standard, don't change it. It's the perfect thing. Why are you trying to tweak something that's so good? So when I find something that works, that I can trust, and I know that whether I'm there or not, it's the same, I stick with it until I cannot stay with it anymore. So,
and even what you said earlier, Dr. Bradshaw, you talked about consistency being the important factor in, feeding your dogs over time. That consistency, gives the dog opportunity, I guess, to be consistent. So if you find a dog food, like even within brands, even with Purina Pro Plan brands, I went to the store a few months ago to get Tanner another bag of dog food. They were out of what I typically feed him. So I grabbed another bag because I was going on a trip and I had to have a supply of dog food for the kennel or my family to feed him or whatever it was. And of course, he got stressed on new dog food. He had diarrhea for, the whole time. And so, I switched him back to to what he normally eats, and immediately went back to normal. His his feces went back to normal almost immediately. But I also wanted to bring up, and again, we're not trying to push ProPlan on people. This is what Stephen and I use. Dr. Bradshaw may have other opinions about other dog foods, and certainly other trainers on here or dog owners have different values or brands that they're loyal to or whatever it is. Like you said, it's about consistency. But this is something that I wanted to bring up. I ran and got this a second ago. The and how effective. I never used this until my current dog, this Tanner, and it definitely works when I need it to. When he's stressed or he's got diarrhea and loose stools, and as you guys have seen, I train out in a groomed public area from my neighborhood. And the last thing that I want to clean up is diarrhea because it ain't happening.
That's a super product. Yeah.
One of the times that we use products like that the most is you see dogs that get stressed on the truck. They may be fine in the kennel. Some of them also get stressed in the kennel, but especially dogs that don't ride well or travel distance well, that's where that probiotic can really be a really great addition to their diet for, however long they need it. Other dogs, you need to keep them on their whole life because they don't have great stomachs. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, it's one of those things they just, when they have blowout diarrhea like that, they lose all those good bacteria like immediately. Like the bad bacteria turn the switch on and like just amplify. And so you gotta balance everything back out again. And sometimes you gotta kind of weigh the balance a little bit more in the good bacteria favor. And that product definitely does it.
You and I have talked about stress a lot. We did some video clips with Jim Ronquist, and we talked a lot about stress and how dogs get stressed and how little things cause dogs to have stress and how it affects their life, the diarrhea and all that stuff. You want to hit on stress a little bit, Dr. Bradshaw, and you too, Stephen, by all means.
Yeah, it definitely
affects them in a huge way.
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, from early on puppy stages all the way up until they get older, I mean, any little change to them is really big. About like little children and them, any sort of change you do, if you go somewhere for a night, you come back in, they're up all night. Consistency, just like with dog food's huge. It keeps the stress down. So anytime they change environments or they have new kennel mates next to them, I mean, it all changes the dynamic of how they operate, and it's consistency.
I think a lot of that also, a lot of that is a genetic component as to how dogs handle stress, but you also see dogs that aren't socialized well, that these stress factors really blow their mind. Because I'm a dog trainer. What I do on a daily basis is add some element of productive stress to their lives and stimulate them in different ways and expect positive results. But I mean, I think back to a dog that's in my kennel for a short amount of time, who she's a really nice dog and runs really well. But when she gets into a uncertain situation, she doesn't perform the same. She gets hesitant. She doesn't have the same motor. She just kind of seems to the way she handles uncertainty is she just slows down and takes everything really slowly. So I brought her in to give a look, kind of get a little sense of urgency about her. But I noticed that it wasn't just in the work. I have multiple airing yards, and I turned her into a different airing yard. Instead of her coming out of the kennel and taking a left, I turned her out of the kennel and sent her right. And she came back in, frothy mouthed, concerned. The fact that I had broke her routine of how she went out of the kennel and went to the airing yard had affected her in that way. So, and that was what I explained to the owner. I said, part of the problem that you're dealing with is just the dog she is and how she handles different changes in situation. And that's why socialization of these dogs at an early age inundating them with as much different stimuli as possible in productive, positive situations makes it so good. You know, the old days they said, you know, let the dog sit in the pen for a year and then start training it. Well, a dog that hasn't been stimulated in multiple ways and you pet them, that is pressure to them. That is a form of pressure. And if they don't know how to interpret it, much less realize that that's a good thing, that is the really troublesome dog to train, because you can't praise them or pressure them without them seeing it as a negative thing.
Yeah.
So, and again, this all goes back to stress and how they're handling it. There's a point that I think we made many episodes ago, Jake. We were talking about one of his hobbies is catching coyotes, and he likes predator control, and he'll catch them in foot traps, and he will actually grab the coyote in the back of the neck, just grab him, pick him up, and put him in the back of the truck. And he doesn't get bit, and they don't act, and it's because they freeze. They don't know how to interpret touch. So when he touches them, they just lock up and don't know what to do. And he can manipulate them that way. And I mean, that's a
really interesting observation.
Yes, it is.
I don't know who did that first, but you know, whoever did that first, kudos. That's an interesting observation to make on how to handle a wild canine like that and what it does. I mean, you know, I see it with bass fishermen all the time. They used to try to lip fish when they would land them because they can't use nets. You know, in the Bassmaster series, now they actually belly grab them and hold them by their belly because it paralyzes them. And I think it's the same effect. It has some sort of shock value, and they don't flop around. They just underbelly. They pick them up by the belly just like that and handle them like a football, and they don't flop around till they get in the boat. So there's less fish that are lost on the actual landing of the fish than there used to be, because they would try to grab them by the lip and they would squirm away and spit the hook out, right? So there's definitely something to that shock value. Patrick Myers brought up something that I wanted to ask too, and I'm going to let him ask it. I feed ProPlan 30/20. How do you feel about floating the dog food? I've heard mixed information. What are the benefits? What are the benefits if you do believe in floating your food? And don't tell my wife I asked, because she manages a vet clinic and her word is gospel. LOL.
So I'm guessing the mixed reviews. Obviously, we got a house divided here.
Choose wisely, huh? I'm a food floating guy. Like, I think it's good to moisten it a little bit. You know, I think it has an effect on their teeth, but at that point, like, I don't think I think the benefit for floating food's a little bit better just from a hydration standpoint than it is worrying about their teeth when they're that young. That's kind of my thought on it. You know, it all goes back to bloat again. You know, people are thinking that that's going to change the effect of the stomach and stomach contents, but you know, I think irregardless if they have food in there, if they have water in there, I mean, I think eventually water's going to find its way into the stomach anyway, and so I think it's pretty good to float the food and kind of go ahead and get it that way. What's your thoughts on that, Steve?
I'm going to touch on a couple things. I was watching a hunting show this weekend and watched Carl Gunzer, who is the head of sporting dogs for Purina and a former field trialer himself, and he advocated floating food. I like to do it, especially on the road. I feed dry when I'm at home, but one of the primary reasons that I do it on the road is to make ease of digestion, but most importantly, to continue with hydration. You see dogs that are so excited when they jump out the truck that they would rather go run in circles and play with all the other dogs than stop and take a drink. And when you feed them wet, you're making them pull some hydration in there, especially the younger the dogs, the more excited they are. and you see some run straight to the bucket, and you see some that never touch it. And those who never touch it are the ones that I'm concerned about, making sure they maintain a good hydration level.
Yeah.
When I've asked that people, whether it be pro trainers or vets, you think I'm speaking for those of us that don't know anything. You think, okay, if you're going to float your food, you're doing that for digestive purposes. But every time I ask a professional about floating food, the answer is always it's about hydration more than anything. Is that right?
I think so.
And the downside, the naysayers of floating food are going to say, then that's going to make it stick to their teeth more. It's going to lead to more plaque buildup. And I understand that. Get a chew toy. Do something, give them something productive there. But we're not talking about letting it sit till it's mush. We're talking about, it's like cereal. As soon as the water hits the food's going into the kennel for the dogs to eat. So it's all you're doing is just adding a little bit of softening. It's really not to soften the food as much as it is to make sure the dogs are drinking enough to stay hydrated.
Steve, I didn't ask that question. Is there a product you recommend for dental health?
This one's on you, doctor.
It's going to be so tough. Each dog tends to, it all kind of comes down to like the bacteria that are in their mouth and ultimately the plaque that forms because of it. And each dog is different. Different foods claim that they work better to keep tartar and plaque off their teeth. And I'd agree that there are dog foods that will cause tartar and plaque to build up on dog teeth. But like, I think we've started to master it in the high end foods that we're feeding performance dogs, and I think that's good. But I don't have a really good product right now. There's a lot of marketed stuff that's out, but I don't feel like it works all that well. It's like my wife's a vet and she brushes our little dog's teeth every day just because she's a vet and she feels like she needs to, but we still clean our dog's teeth every 6 months because I just don't feel like there's anything. We just got to kind of stay on top of it and look for problems and just kind of keep a close eye, on back towards those back teeth and those back molars and premolars and making sure they're not, it doesn't look really bad. Because when it starts to look really bad, that's when you get abscesses. But a little plaque and tartar, it's not going to hurt anything.
And if you've got a dog that likes to get in your face and he's got really bad breath, you need to check his back teeth because it's probably bacteria.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. I'm bad when I'm in a holding blind and I'm bored. Instead of petting my dog on the head, I'm usually pulling his lips back and flicking plaque off his teeth. I was doing that today. So it's a give and take. And one of the interesting things that I heard years ago was when the bomb dog program took off and you had so much governmental evaluation of dogs. One of the things that the doctors, the vets wanted to see, they were encouraged when they saw plaque build up on the dog's teeth. And the reason being that was proof that the dog was chewing its food, not just inhaling it. So that I thought that was an interesting observation, that they were actually, tartar buildup to them was not the worst thing in the world, because it was just showing that the dog was actually not just one of those dogs that, look like a vacuum cleaner when their face hit the bowl, they just suck the whole thing in.
Right.
Because obviously chewed up food is going to digest better than that whole.
That's for sure.
So Jeff Matthews asked an interesting question. What do you advise I give my dog for arthritic elbows? Is there anything I can do to help him continue to be active without being in so much pain? He's 8 years old and he has problems for 3 years. I know you're going to say, I'm sorry, I got to go to the bathroom.
So, come on, Jack, stay with us now. Come on. Well, at least take the headphone with you to the bathroom.
You don't want to hear that, brother.
Yeah, so I guess as far as arthritis is concerned in general, be it their hips or their elbows, I'm a strong believer in joint supplements, glucosamine, MSM, chondroitin, those things. I get those going, and I get them going pretty strong. Elbows are tough. They're really, really tough because there's a few different things that can happen in an elbow. You can have small little fractures. You can have bone spurs. You can have different things going on in different areas. So, if joint supplements and anti-inflammatory medication like Remedil and things like that aren't cutting it, there are some surgeries that do exist where you can go in there and there's some specialists that'll take a look inside of an elbow and or can kind of tell us a little bit more about things. But those are our two basic things. So anti-inflammatories and then glucosamine supplements. Also, we've been doing um, a lot of fatty acid supplementation. So just fish oil, like 3 to 4,000 milligrams of fish oil once a day, has done way more good for arthritis than some of the glucosamine supplements that we've done. But you got to be kind of cautious about how quickly you ramp that up, get diarrhea. But yeah, doing fish routinely is a really good way to work with arthritis.
They can only absorb so much anyway, right? So you get your diarrhea from the what the body can't absorb. Is that correct?
Yeah, right, right. So
I get mine from milk.
Are you a big believer in some of the injectables that you hear people talking about, Adequan, polyglycan, all that other stuff that you see a lot of the performance people gravitating towards?
it has its uses, but it's not. You can't like use it broadly. I don't think it works a lot of times, but I think it definitely doesn't hurt. But I don't know. I have my doubts at times, like just with how much it costs, how much you have to do, and the results that I see. I just I don't believe in it as much as I feel like I ought to at times.
Well, I've seen mixed results. I've seen some really, really, dogs who my orthopedic guy is a big believer in polyglycan, which is ironic because a lot of vets are not. This guy's also a big horse guy, which makes sense that he's big on polyglycan because that's usually a big time horse deal. But I remember at the end of Dude's career when he was, a 10-year-old, 90-pound dog that was coming off of ACL surgery. He couldn't have passed the drug test if he wanted to, running the last crown because we were trying to keep him as comfortable as possible. I do think, Jeff, one of the biggest things is productive exercise to help, your low impact stuff, keeping him swimming as much as possible. The worst thing you can do with a dog that has achy joints is not let them use those joints. I know there's a balance to be struck there. You can't, you're going to lose some on one end and one on the other, but I think it's the same thing in old folks. You let them sit up and do nothing, and that's the worst thing you can do. So keeping them active, I think keeping them healthy as far as not overweight, not underweight, and keeping them in low impact, and that motion there is very important. And I'm an anti-inflammatory. I'll pop pills on that in a hurry.
I know I do personally, so I know what they want to.
Yes, indeed.
Alicia Jordan asked, are products such as antlers or elbows, cow elbows, productive to give for dental health? I was going to bring something up, and I'm asking both of you guys. This is a synthetic deer antler that I bought at PetSmart the other day, or Petco, one of the two, I can't remember. And I bought these before I left. There's two of them. And for the first time in my life, I found a product that didn't get eaten in less than an hour. And these have been in the basement for a week now. And he's only chewed the ends off of these things. And look, he's right here right now. Look, see right, he wants it so bad. But this is, I'll get the name of it. Are these things, because, he's back in the back. He's gnawing on it constantly, and he hasn't eaten it yet. And I'm thinking, okay, this might actually be good for his teeth. Is that true, or is that a myth?
I think it's good for his teeth. I think it's going to pop some tartar off of there potentially. Clean his teeth off, or off. I know I've taken a few of those out of some dogs though. That's for sure.
Is that right?
That was where I was headed. You know,
I've taken.
you got to be super careful on what types of chew toys you give them. When you say synthetic, that always throws a red flag to me.
Be careful.
Because yeah, I mean, the worst. Back me up here if I'm wrong, or correct me if I'm wrong. But the little rawhide chews that, you know, they're almost a mouthful before they ever grab a hold to them, and they get soft and they can ingest them. Those scare me.
Yeah.
Those, you get a, you know, obstructed bowel. It is a nasty, nasty thing.
I'm thinking if that thing gets small enough to where he could actually swallow it, I need to dump it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've heard, you know, things that are natural that can be passed and broken down are always a good thing, but there's an inherent risk in all of them. I've seen people go to the butcher and get sliced femur bones. So they're round, you know, they're big enough they can't swallow, but they have that marrow inside of them. So the dog's working to get it out, and they'll work on them pretty good and really work on their teeth as well. That's usually a pretty good idea as well.
Yeah, I think you got to know your dog and know if they're one of those that swallow kind of dog, you know.
Dude, my dog, I'm telling you, my dog, if I let him, he could probably eat a gunner kennel. The guy, I mean, what is it about? Is it all dogs or is it just labs? They feel like they can eat.
Labs are the worst.
Oh my goodness, they eat headphone or headset, you know, face masks, cups. I mean, they can eat anything. Unbelievable.
I think the thing that I'll out of labs usually are like corn cobs. That has to be the biggest thing when they get in the trash. Those cause the most obstructions. I feel like it's a corn cob a month for sure for me.
Does it get stuck going in or coming out?
I get stuck in their small intestine. So just how tough it is on the outside of the corn cob just starts that like friction against the small intestine, and it can't pass. And yeah, it's
so
usually
if that happens. If you're home and that happens, what do you do?
Well, it's usually like a slow progression. So over a few days, they'll start throwing up. They'll stop eating. You know, they'll feel bad, and then as it starts to gas starts to back up, and then they feel worse and worse. And so usually you're like, hey, something's not right. Usually you know, and you've got a good bit of time.
I should start a scrapbook on the things that are passed at the kennel after dogs come into training. It's some interesting things that we have. A client of mine years ago, he and they were newlyweds. They, you know, good looking young couple, just, you know, not too far out of advanced education, and they come with their dog and you know, drop the dog off. And the next morning I'm walking down the kennel and I'm like, what is that? And it's a pink thong. And so I immediately, most of my clients will tell you, if the phone rings and my name pops up, they don't want to answer it because something bad, you know, they don't want to hear. I'm not calling just to talk, you know what I'm saying? Hey, we got a problem here. So I call this guy and I'm like, hey, bud, how's your relationship with you and your wife? And he's like, you know, I think we're okay. I was like, because I've had some underhanded things done, you know, for folks to try to get me to call and give updates on their dog, but as a set of panties in the kennel is a little bit of overkill, and he just lost it. And I mean, it was too funny. The only thing that made it funnier was that my kennel guy that found it, he's in his mid-70s, and he had no idea what it was. I mean, he was just at a loss. What is this? And I am flat losing it. But I mean, it's amazing what you see dogs come into training, and then a couple of days later, you look at their kennel and like, how did that ever happen?
I was on campus one time when I was in school, and I heard this dog howling. You could tell it was in pain. So I just I rerouted my route walking to class, and I started following the sound of the dog howling finally, it was in the woods, and it was on this trail in the woods, and it was a beagle, and it had something sticking out of its anus. It was about that long. And so I stepped on it. I grabbed the dog by the ribs, and I pushed the dog away while this thing came out of its anus. And it wasn't a washcloth, and it wasn't a beach towel. It was one of those mid-size. It was like a mid-size towel. It was literally twisted up into the size of the intestine, and he ate the towel, and he passed the entire towel. I mean, probably saved his life when I came along, or someone else would have, but it was like, wow, like you just literally passed that entire towel through your digestive tract. Unbelievable. And why did you eat the damn thing in the first place? Must have wiped their mouth. They must have been eating ribs or something, and they used that as a washcloth. Unreal what they can eat.
There was one, and I think it was I'm not to try to pull you into that conversation, but Paul Dunhauser asked if there was legitimacy in when a dog is bloated when they come back from water work that has taken on some, hey baby, love you, that has brought water into their stomach, or they've got air and water in there. Is there merit to making them burp to keep them from, is there any truth to the let them burp or crap before putting them into the truck to avoid a stomach twist? I'm going to let Doc answer one part of it, but I will tell you, if they do burp or make some room in there, I promise you they feel better when they get in.
For sure.
Does that potentially prevent a twist as well?
Yeah, I mean, gas, any gas in there, especially if they've taken in water. So if you think about a balloon with gas and water in it, I mean, there's always the potential there. So you want to make them burp if you can, and if they're going to. As far as defecating, there's not any merit to that at all in my mind, I don't think. But
I think when you see them do that, it's actually because of the increased pressure in the abdomen, and it's just pressing in general. So that might make them feel a little better, but the air in the stomach is what needs to go, Paul.
Pablo asked, let's make sure we get these in a row. What's your opinion giving some maltodextrin energy supplement within 15 minutes or so of a long hunt or hard exercise to allow quicker recovery for the next day? That's from Andy May. Do you use maltodextrin energy supplement? No,
not me. No, I don't. That's it. I'm not using much for supplement in the category.
The best way they're going to recover on a 4 or 5 day hunt is being in good shape before they start that 4 or 5 day hunt.
Amen. How do you feed your dog on? Speaking of which, this is from Pablo Lupus again down in Peru. How do you feed your dog on a hunt trip? I usually feed him twice a day, one in the morning and late at night. But whenever we said you like to make them burp, no, I'm sorry, that jumped up there. But whenever we go hunting, I feed only on the evenings and a little water. Is that okay?
Yeah, from my standpoint, I like to continue to be consistent. Like you can't change their diet up, or I wouldn't change their diet up. Like I would continue to do what I'm going to do. But if I'm going to try to get them to digest, feed the hunt, and then allowing them to kind of build up some of their stores, for the next day. But it all comes down to staying consistent with what you're doing, and if that's working and they're used to it, that's how their body's going to be used to dealing with the food, digesting the food. Then that's what I'd keep doing. I wouldn't change it up at all for the hunt. I'd continue to do things the same as I usually do.
That being said, Pablo, I'm a once a day feeding kind of guy anyway. I don't like to feed twice a day for a multitude of reasons, but one of the ways that I like to justify that is, I look at these dogs for the wild animals that they once were, and they weren't on our morning and evening eating cycle. They were eating whenever they could, and one meal a day would have been a feast for any wild animal, that is a carnivore.
Yeah, and that once a day gets us closer to that status that they once were and their ability, because that's got to be the closest way that they metabolized food.
Well, what did Papa do to be on my hit list this time?
Like a lion or a wolf, you could feed your dog a 5-gallon bucket of dog food once a week.
You laugh. There's a lot of hound dog people that day. I mean, those dogs eat a lot less than once a day, I can assure you. This is a good one for you, Doc. Is there any truth to not allowing a dog to drink out of an elevated dog bowl to prevent stomach twists? Have them always drink from the floor.
No, I don't see any merit to that at all. Not for that particular deal. There's some other issues that dogs can get where you treat them in that fashion, but not for bloat at all.
We got about 30 minutes left, and I think the two big topics, that people are mainly concerned about right now are going to be heat stroke and stomach flip. And so I feel like we should probably start digging into this stomach flip and heat stroke is maybe in the show with the heat stroke conversation, because we're late August now. It's hotter than hell from coast to coast and north to south. I mean, California's on fire, and so is Colorado, and there's lots of concerns right now. I had a dog training friend who had a dozen dogs on her truck. She parked under the same shade tree, did everything routine, just like she always does. She came back to the trailer just happened about 2 weeks ago, and there's one dead dog and two dogs that were almost dead in her truck. And, she got them back. She got them cooled off in time. Don't know what the long-term effect is going to be on them, but it was an extremely tragic event, and so definitely want to talk about heat stroke. What about stomach flip? What's the technical name for stomach flip from a veterinary standpoint?
So it's gastric dilation and volvulus. So the stomach or the gastric portion of that fills up, and then it's going to rotate. So the rotation is what causes all the issues, because when it rotates, then it pretty much kinks off all the blood flow, and it the blood flow dynamics inside of there. And so, sure, they've got the discomfort of their stomach being flipped, but then they also aren't getting blood to certain areas within their body, and so that's ultimately what causes the really big problem.
What actually kills? I'm just going to be direct and straightforward, because we all know you got an hour or two before the serious, irreversible effect occurs. What actually kills the dog?
They go into septic shock, essentially. So they go into shock, like, bacteria translocate across the wall of the stomach. So they go across and start to go into the bloodstream. And when that happens, it starts this cascade of events that they're not able to come back from, and their body just can't compensate and deal with it well at all. So yeah, I mean, you're just trying to, because ultimately blood goes in because arteries are really, really thick, so they don't get really kinked off, but blood can't go out because of the veins get pulled tight, so blood just pools. And then say when I or somebody else goes in to
tourniquet.
Yeah, exactly. So when I or somebody else goes in to flip the stomach back over, all that blood with all those toxins in it now is released in the body, and that's what does it.
So it goes septic at that point. So how do you? I mean, we've talked about this before, and I know this is a really difficult question to answer. It's easy to ask because everyone wants to know what causes it. Two-part question: what causes it, and how what can you do to at least minimize it from happening?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's just a stroke of bad luck, just all all the things coming together, all this scenario coming together, and it's just happening all at the same time, and you get that rotation. Just something happens. I think it can be something as small as the dog going from standing up to laying down, and just the move, just rotating things. I don't think it has to be as traumatic as we want to believe it is. Like, I think it's just a horrible stroke of bad luck, isn't it?
Um, you see it more in dogs that have big barrel chests, narrow waists. See it. Great Danes are highly apt to they have a bigger tendency to have this happen because you got, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it, you got more room inside for it to happen.
Sure.
I think dogs that get super excited in contained situations, or also whether it be in a small kennel or in a bigger kennel, have a tendency to be at higher risk for it. I think exactly what you're saying. It doesn't have to be anything dramatic. You hear people say, well, that's why I feed twice a day, because they always need food in their stomach. And then you hear other people go, well, no, there's food in their stomach that makes it happen, or they drank too much water. I did a pretty good bit of research in this several years ago. And one of the things that I read, and it may have changed by now, Dr. Bradshaw, I'm sure you know, but they had never been able to make it happen in a controlled situation. That, and that tells me if you can't make it happen on purpose, then you really don't know what the factors are that contribute to it happening. And when I hear somebody like Dr. Bradshaw say, this is just bad luck, I mean, there's a lot more to that statement than you realize, because it's not like he just, happened around and said, you know what, this is just a luck thing. He obviously hasn't been able to connect the dots on what makes it happen either.
Right. It's always the it's not the one that I expect is going to do. It's not the crazy young, really really barrel chested dog. It'll be the one that I just, it's just it blows my mind to see some of the dogs that I see with it, and I can't put my finger on exactly what causes it, or which ones are going to get it, or really even how to prevent it. To be honest, it usually just creeps in, and really is just heartbreaking every time it happens.
Well, the true real way to prevent it is you attack their stomach, right?
Definitely, that's true. Yeah.
So, if you have a dog that needs to go in for some other procedure that they're going to have to be put to sleep, and you feel like that this is something that you're going to lose sleep over, they actually can go in and tack the stomach to the abdominal wall so that it can't physically flip.
Yeah.
Does that have a long-term side effect or an adverse effect to it?
I've never seen any adverse effect, but we don't typically do it with labs. It tends to be Great Danes. That's our go-to. If we're gonna spay a Great Dane, we're gonna do we're gonna tack the stomach down. So yeah, we just don't do it a lot in labs. But coming back to it, I'm not gonna do it in my lab. Because it doesn't. Because I don't feel that. I don't feel that there. It's it's just so random in which it happens.
One of the most go ahead, Steve.
Go ahead, Jack.
Well, I was going to tell a story, so why don't you go ahead and say what you're going to say first?
Well, maybe I was going to tell a story.
Maybe.
For what I'm seeing, I'll give you an example of what we've dealt with in the last couple of weeks. I believe that there are varying degrees of gastric torsion, and I think sometimes dogs will partially flip and then rectify, and those are super dangerous animals. If you see something happen and something wasn't just right and your dog's not acting the same, if they flip once, it is not a matter of if they'll flip again. In my opinion, it's simply when. If something like that does happen, you do need to go ahead and go through with that procedure. 3 weeks ago, I believe, at one of my guys' kennels, they were working. It was first thing in the morning. It's pouring down rain, so they were working on a clogged drain. That's another thing they don't tell you when you become a professional dog trainer is you got to be semi-plumber at some point, and there's nothing more infuriating than dog hair. But
I was doing it this morning.
exactly right. You know, this is the rock star lifestyle I'm living. But they were actually working on a drain, and a dog that had been fined 30 minutes before, one of the guys went into the kennel and dog's laying on its side, running in distress. So Will immediately put the dog in the truck, you know, broke all kind of speeding laws to get to the vet, got there as soon as it opened. They took an x-ray and the vet said, there's, you know, it's flipped, but it's not all the way. And he started talking about intubating the dog, and Will looked at the vet and said, you need a dog to burp? They said, exactly. And so he made them burp the way that we do when they come out of the water. He grabbed behind the ribs and he pushed in. And he said when the dog burped, it was like 5 seconds straight.
Wow.
And they took another x-ray and the stomach had righted itself. And I immediately called my owner, told him what happened, and said, this is not something to take lightly. We need to have this procedure done. One of the things that's really neat to this, Dr. Bradshaw, was my vet did it and immediately called me and said, Stephen, there's something else wrong with this dog. He said his stomach is huge, like a basketball, and there's no reason why. And I want to run blood work. We ran blood work, and the dog had a low thyroid, had a hypothyroid. And he said this was a condition that was creeping in different ways. He said, and as soon as we put him on Suboxone, you could see the dog starting to improve. So actually having a low thyroid in some way, shape, form, or fashion contributed to the gastric torsion on this dog. It was a very scary thing. And you don't hear very many people say, well, my dog's stomach flipped and he's allowed to talk about it, because some of the other material I read said that most of it happens between 4 and 6 o'clock in the afternoon, which corresponds with feeding time. And after that, everybody goes home. And then you got a dead dog when you come to the kennel the next day. It's a scary thing.
One of the most heartbreaking stories, you know, from a dear friend of mine, Jim Ronquist, was Tank, who was only 10 at the time. I mean, I say only 10. He was still, you know, he was still doing well. He's running like an 8-year-old dog. And he called me at whatever it was, 5 o'clock in the morning, and said, dude, I have no idea what's going on, but Tank is struggling to breathe. He's on his side. He's lethargic. He's almost flat to the ground. I threw him in the truck, and I'm headed to Little Rock to the 24-hour, emergency vet hospital in Little Rock. And in the meantime, he called Dr. Ira McCauley to get advice from him. He's like, dude, you can't drive fast enough. You need to get him in there immediately because his stomach is flipped and he doesn't have much time. And literally he got to Little Rock, called me back about 45 minutes later, and Tank was gone. One of the most, heartbreaking, personally, close to home situations. And it was awful. It's just freaking awful. And you feel helpless. You should have done something different. The reality is there's probably nothing he could have done. I think he had just eaten. And so, one of my questions I think we've touched on a little bit is, does this typically happen soon after a meal? I mean, is this the sloshing of the water and the food when they lay down a certain way or jump into the back of the truck or jump back in or in and out of the kennel? Like, it's just the way it lines up and how the weight carries the stomach causes it to flip. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's just physics when it comes down to it. Gas, it's not like what's in their stomach is floating essentially. So if they've got gas in there, that's, but when you add water and you add things that move and start sloshing around, that's ultimately what's going to cause the physics and of the whole scenario to take place. But yeah.
Wow.
That's one thing, you think about how many times you walk down your back steps going outside, and then one day you just randomly step wrong and twist your ankle and fall on your face. How many times you've been up and down those steps? It makes no sense why that happened, but it did.
Yep.
It's even worse than that. It really is. It's so frustrating when you feel like you've done all you can do to keep them safe and something like that happens. I've seen it happen, and thank God not too much in my career. Sometimes it's been catastrophic. Sometimes we've been able to save them, but just inexplicable ways. You put dogs away for the night that have been totally fine, and the next morning they're gone. It's not even like they're struggling. They're just gone. And you see a dog to die that quick. On the other side of it, you realize, I mean, their threshold for pain, their ability to survive is so incredible. It's got to be something really catastrophic to kill a dog, that quickly. I mean, you see them get hit by trucks and live. I mean, not trucks going slow here. I mean, it's crazy.
It's just, yeah, it's happenstance. I don't think there's anything other than tacking their stomach that you can do to prevent it. And I tack stomachs quite a bit, and it's pretty routine for me, but we just don't do it routinely in labs. It's just not one of those things we do a lot.
So, is there anything else we need to talk about in terms of stomach flip? Because I'd like to jump over to heat strokes. That we're right in the middle of heat stroke season, and it's probably a good way to end the show.
I think one thing that I would like to say is, where we live in Arkansas, I'm sure where Stephen lives in South Georgia, there's not a whole lot of like after hours vets. I mean, you could call your vet, which it's awesome to have a vet on call, but even me in the middle of the night by myself, I'm not as prepared as I want to be a lot of times. Treat a GDV loader stomach flip, so if you see your dog is really, really sick and feeling really, really bad, then I would call one of those more equipped 24-hour clinics and at least get their take on the scenario, because they'll usually, even the one in Little Rock here, will pick up the phone, and there'll be a technician and a doctor there to talk to, so you can always talk to them and say, what do you think I can wait, and usually they're not wanting you to come in at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I mean, so if there's a reason, if they feel like it's okay to wait, then it is definitely okay to wait. But they're going to be super quick to move whenever it seems like you got a stomach twist. So just know where your 24-hour vets are that are close by, and know the ones you know your vet, but know the specialist in the area, because they're the ones that are going to be able to do a whole lot more, a whole lot faster, and I think you have a little bit better chance of them surviving if you see that. So I just wanted to kind of make that statement anyway.
What Dr. Bradshaw is saying is that 3 o'clock in the morning is not the time to start shopping for specialists.
Exactly. So let's talk about heat stroke. Another one of those topics that, that come on suddenly. You may be doing the same thing that you've done for years, and all of a sudden one dog or another, on a truck or in a kennel or even out playing. I had a dog, I had a Chesapeake pass out one time. We were at Lake McConaughey playing in the shallow water. And of course we were out there all day. And my dog, people were throwing bumpers and tennis balls and everything else, sticks and everything else for him. And he literally went from being totally fine, collapsed in about 6 inches of water. I picked him up, put him in the back seat of my pickup, turned the air conditioner on. I mean, that's all. I don't know if it was right or not. I started the truck up, turned the air conditioner on, put a towel on him. I dried him off and just sat with him, and he came to, and he was fine after that. And I'd say it took about 30 to 45 minutes for him to get back on his feet. But, it was a pretty close call. What are we talking about here with heat stroke, Doc?
It varies. You start out with, dogs that are overheated all the way up to like severely overheated, where you're starting to see like effects on their organs. So their kidneys, and ultimately their kidneys are a big concern. So it's so vast I tend to treat every heat stroke that I see that doesn't get better pretty quick. I tend to treat them all the same way because they can just, one dog can go downhill so quickly. So I tend to treat them all the same way, and I get an IV catheter in and go that route if they're coming to me. But you know, from a trainer standpoint, I know that's completely different, and just from a personal dog standpoint, I know that's completely different because you can tell, but it's pretty. I think there's more after effects than we wanna say there is a lot of times.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm super concerned about. So if I see a dog and they think he's overheated, I'm going to put a catheter in and give fluids and try to protect those kidneys. That's huge to me. It really is. But for the every, it's a little different. And
What are your signs of overheating that you look for while the dog's working?
ears back, tongue hanging out, definitely slowing down. Um, you know, uh, just groggy, lethargic. That's definitely when you start to see them slowing down, and not just, and when you start to see them slowing down, that's when I'm like, yeah, I back down. But that's me being overly precautious. Maybe I'm being maybe they're just a little lazy, but I'm definitely being careful. So what are your?
Well, I mean, obviously the longer, the wider, and the whiter the tongue gets is always usually big signs for me. How they're labor breathing. Obviously, if they get kind of wobbly on their feet, you're getting in a danger zone, and you need to back down in a hurry. That being said, I think we panic, and one of the things that I really wanted to hear Dr. Bradshaw's opinion on is I think we cool them down too quickly sometimes. If a dog's borderline hot, cooling down slowly is a good thing. If they're in the danger zone and you got to get them out of that, then drastic measures are in order. But for a dog that's just a little bit warm, throwing ice cold water on it is not the answer. You're going to end up with throwing them into shock if you do that. So, I mean, what's your opinion on that, Dr. Bradshaw?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to try to bring their body temp down as slow as I can. I'm not going to dunk a dog in any water at the vet clinic. I know that's for sure. I mean, I'll do some like alcohol on their paw pads, alcohol along their back if they're really bad. But yeah, I think your immediate move to throwing ice water on them is not a good idea at all. You don't want to move. You don't want to move drastically in that direction.
If you do use water, you got to remember too that stagnant water is not helping. If you just wet the dog and then stop with the water, then the dog's actually going to start heating up again. One of the things that I always have to remember and remind all my people is that a dog's not done heating up when it's done working. As soon as they get done working, their body temperature is still continuing to rise. So if you put them in a box unobserved and they're anywhere close to hot, you could end up with a dog actually having heat stroke in the box. I had a dog yesterday that looked like, I knew that I had run him hard. I knew that I was not in the danger zone of heat, but I was definitely had stressed him significantly. And when I put him up, I just didn't like the way he was breathing. It was almost like he was having an asthma attack. His throat was not, it was like it was constricted and he was not allowed to get the amount of oxygen to his body. So I actually pulled him back out of the box and sat with him. And I was in the middle of the field. It was hot. I did put some, it wasn't cold water, it was cool water, but I was running it out of my truck and I never stopped once I needed, and it was only because I checked everything else. And what was weird is that for me, one of the big signs of if a dog's okay or not is if they will drink. If you present water to them and they don't want to drink, that's usually a bad sign that they're too hot. But when they drink, you don't want them to drink too much because then they can actually throw their electrolytes out of whack in their body. or they'll drink too much and they'll immediately throw up. But what I noticed that was really strange about him is that when he would drink, immediately after he drank, his breathing would be regulated, and he would breathe fine for several breaths, and then he would start back to that labored breathing. So I kept him drinking a little bit at a time just to keep him pulling more oxygen into his lungs after he quit drinking. It was crazy. I've seen it happen once or twice, but it was almost more asthma related than it was heat related. It was brought on by stress. I'm not going to argue that, but like I said, I just turned the water on out of the back of my truck and literally kept wetting him across his belly until he totally regulated. But if you just wet a dog, you need to do it with, water out of the tap, not ice water, and just keep it running. Don't let them just sit there and be, don't wet them and stop, because then they're heating that water up around them and they're actually getting hotter again.
For sure.
So what I did by putting, my dog on the back seat on a towel, cranking the truck up and turning the air conditioner on, is that the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, situation for sure. But I mean, I think I think we're just trying to stay away from ice water. Everybody wants to go and dump ice water on a dog, and that just causes them to like vasoconstrict and completely messes up their ability to regulate heat at that point. And I think that's the big concern. So putting them in the AC, I don't think that's a bad thing. If you've got it, but if your dog's to the point where you're worried, I don't think it's going to hurt at all. But I think I'd probably, if you're concerned they're lethargic and they're not really regulating well, I'd get them in the truck and start kind of heading in the direction of a vet, to be honest, turn the AC on. But I wouldn't like stick them in it. But you just don't want those big swings in temperature.
Right.
Because when they actually do cool off, when you do something like that, they'll actually go past their body temperature and go into they'll actually dip below their body temperature, and then you're in the other realm. You actually got to warm them back up, and that's not anything good either. But heat is a scary thing. I mean, there's no two ways about it. It really, it'll bring you to your knees. And it can sneak up on you on days that don't feel, that feel really good to us. They can still be super dangerous to dogs. If you don't pick the amount of work that's gonna, you can get good work in and get good training in without overheating the dogs. And that's a very, very fine line to walk sometimes.
Choosing the time of day to train and all that goes.
Well, time of day is a lie that we tell ourselves a lot. Morning times we are good. I'm not going to argue that. But then you hear people go, "Well, I'm going to train late in the evening." Well, I got news for you. The water temperature is never hotter than at dark. I mean, the sun's been on all day long. So, and hot water is more dangerous than hot air, in my opinion. You can get a dog stressed and dealing with all kind of issues when you're dealing with hot water, and they don't get an opportunity to come out and dry off in a reasonable amount of time. So this is, like I said, heat's something that scares me to death. And what Dr. Bradshaw said that I can't emphasize enough is just because your dog cooled down doesn't mean it's out of the danger zone. I mean, if you got to a high level of heat, you can be dealing with acute organ failure that doesn't show up until it's too late, or you don't realize what's happening until it's too late. And you're dealing with when they crash like that, it's not pretty to watch. One of the things that I like to keep in my emergency kit is I actually have IV fluids, and I'm not trying to hit a line and insert. But if I have a dog that gets hot that I'm worried about, we'll actually just right on their back insert a needle, and it looks like a bubble. You put fluid in there under their skin and let that fluid absorb into their body slowly. So I'm not trying to hit a line. I'm not trying to hit a vein and be precise. I'm just trying to get as you know, and I'm not talking about cold fluids. I'm just talking about room temperature fluids that are helping the dog's temperature regulate and maintain hydration. Usually when we're doing something like that, we're headed to the vet anyway, out of precaution. But that is something that's not a bad thing to have in your emergency medical kit. If they get too hot, you can, right under their skin, especially on their back where the skin's loose, you can pump a fair amount of fluids in there and help a dog regulate in a pretty safe manner.
That's definitely why.
Paul Donhauser asked a really good question, which is the antithesis of overheating. What about the opposite, hunting in cold water? What should you look for? And what are the remedies in the field miles from the truck? Like where we hunt in Nebraska, I mean, it can be 10 below and the sloughs are 55 degrees coming out of the ground, but he hits the water, picks a duck up, he's blowing through dry, powdery snow. He gets back to the pit or the blind, and he's got icicles, hanging off of his muzzle or his nose or his ears or his back or whatever it is, and they're shivering. Obviously, you shiver to prevent it's asymmetric muscle movement, right? To prevent hypothermia. But where is that line between cold and too cold? And how do you know if your dog's going to go into hypothermic shock or not?
Oh man, yeah, that's a tough one. Because it's so different for me hunting here. When there's ice, I tend to keep the dog in the truck, to be honest. It doesn't happen a whole lot here, but where you're at, it happens a ton.
If I did that, we'd never have a dog because it's cold every day where we hunt,
Right. I mean, and it's just, I don't know. One of those things that I want to make sure they're conditioned to that. But the signs, they tend to get lethargic. They tend to, start staggering around. They tend to act, not like themselves. It's you can start to tell that things aren't right. And then when you notice that, that's when you need to start warming them up. But yeah, I mean, they need to be conditioned to those kind of environments for sure where you're at. Gotta be hard.
I see limp tails all the time. People come up from the south and the dog hits the water the first time, and their freaking tail goes limp and they don't want to go. They will not get out of their box or whatever, the rest of the day. And, you always see the dog owner embarrassed or ashamed of it, like it's something that happened to the dog and in their performance, but it's shock. And it's not a good thing. I see it all the time out there, man. And that's why we try to discourage. I know people want to bring their dogs, and I want them to be able to experience that as well. Yet at the same time, something like that's going to happen. We try to discourage that as much as possible too, for the health of the dog.
Yeah,
I think one of the biggest things to help avoid that, and what is very easy for you and most of your hunting, Jake, is the opportunity for the dog to self to get out of the elements. It doesn't have to, for instance, when I see dogs get too cold, it's because they're hunting in cold water and aren't allowed to get out of the cold water. They're hunting on a stand that is submerged or something like that, where the dog's continually, it's like sitting on a concrete bleachers watching a football game. That concrete just sucks all the heat out of you if you don't have a buffer underneath. Dogs just need the opportunity to be able to self-isolate so that they can warm themselves up most of the time, especially labs, or other retrievers. If you can just give them a dry-ish place to be, they can usually take care of themselves. But when they're sitting in the water and can't get out, or they're sitting in the elements and not able to get inside of a mutt hut or something like that where they can really warm it up, that's when you see them get into the danger zone. And the question you got to ask yourself, Paul, is how much do you really like your dog? Because if he starts getting too cold like that and you're away from the truck, the only way you're going to warm him up is to get him wrapped up or use your own body heat to warm him up. So put him in your jacket, lay in the foot of the boat and hold him if you're going to have that long boat ride back and you got to warm him up. That's they are excellent at keeping themselves warm, but when they get below that body temperature, they just need a little help to get back up and headed in the right direction.
How do you feel about vests?
Down here, the primary reason for a dog to wear a vest down here is to keep from puncture wounds, in beaver ponds, things like that. It seldom gets so cold that a dog needs a vest to be able to stay warm down here if they are conditioned to the elements. Like I said, we're dealing more with protecting chests from pokies, but I mean, I don't have a problem. I think it's a good thing for them when they're going to be having an extended period of time in cold water or in cold elements. I think a vest is a great idea.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, it's usually preventing getting poked, but yeah, I mean, especially where you're at in Nebraska, man, I know I'd want one on.
The other side of it too is a lot of those vests provide a little bit of flotation, and that'll help them if they do start getting a little bit cold, help them get out. The other thing to remember though, there's a blessing and a curse in all of it. You got, there's also the opportunity that's more things for snags to hang on. They could get hung up in vines easier, things like that when they've got a vest on. So I'm normally a less is more guy until it gets to the point that if I'm adding extra layers, I'm debating on whether or not my dog's going to wear a vest.
Well, believe it or not, we went over 2 hours on this one. I thought this was actually going to be a short show for some odd reason, but it turned out to be a really long, informative, interesting show. Dr. Bradshaw, we really appreciate you coming on. I know you were busy and you made time for us to come on and answer questions, be a part of the discussion, and we really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you
Appreciate you
for having me on. I appreciate it. It was awesome.
Can I offer to people out there that have questions for you to hit him up? It's at Jonathan Bradshaw. Is it Jonathan or Jonathan _ Bradshaw? Or?
Jonathan _ Bradshaw.
Yep. On Instagram, is it okay for people to send you direct messages with questions to have answers? Okay.
Yeah. I'll answer him.
You'll be at the Crown. You'll be at the Crown and at the end of October in Huntsville. Is that right? The Crown Championship for the SRS. So yeah, look out for Dr. Bradshaw. He does labs and he specializes in sporting dogs. So if you guys have questions, hit him up. Good dude.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Stephen.
All right, buddy.
Thank you, guys.
Good night. Stephen, I'm going to keep you on for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Well, once again, we had a really informative discussion. We actually held a ton of people on here.
I think are you still live? Because it looks like
we're still live.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
Yeah, we're still live. I wanted to keep you live just to kind of close the show and let Dr. Bradshaw get to his evening. But that was informative for me. It seemed like everybody had some good questions, and thanks for your time. Thanks for your expertise from a trainer standpoint, because I think it's important to hear from a dummy like me and a professional like you, and then a doctor, to get 3 different perspectives. For everyone that was watching, and I think it was very informative. So,
you're right about the perspective aspect, because we all approach it from different levels, and unfortunately, most of my perspective comes from learning things the hard way, experiencing them and trying to be better and more prepared next time. I mean, my young dog guy this morning, we were dealing with a situation, and I said, stuff like this, you either learn from it and get better, or you let it beat you. And if you let it beat you and you just roll over, you might as well go ahead and quit. So it's a continual learning curve every day.
No doubt about it. Well, thanks everybody for joining us here on the Retriever Connection with Stephen Durrance and Jake Latondras. Next week, I know Stephen probably tomorrow or maybe even tonight, Stephen and I will talk about some homework for me and Tanner to do. I'll be here for another week before I have to go out on another filming adventure. So I'll have time to get some work in with Tanner over the next few days. So until then, you guys have a good evening. Stephen, thank you so much. We'll catch y'all next week on the Retriever Connection.
Thanks, guys.